This is the Aptitude Outdoors Podcast, where we interview travelers, explorers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the best tips and stories from around the world. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Aptitude Outdoors Podcast here on YouTube. Thanks for tuning back in. If you can, go down below, help me out by hitting that subscribe button. Tonight I'm welcoming back Kyle Lutz. If you remember from an earlier episode in the season, Kyle discussed his Appalachian Trail Thru-Hike and his Pacific Crest Trail Thru-Hike. Recently, he completed the Continental Divide Trail, and that just wrapped up his Triple Crown goal. And he is only 20 years old. That's pure insanity. So I'm really stoked for you to hear Kyle's experiences on the CDT. So let's dive into it and see what Kyle has to say about that. So, man, I'm actually super stoked to talk to you again. Welcome back to the podcast, by the way. How have you been holding up, man? You just finished your CDT Thru-Hike, which we talked about before. How you feeling right now?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm pretty happy that it's done. It really wasn't what I was expecting at all. This year was just so weird with all the pandemic stuff going around. So there's just no one really else out there. It's kind of weird.
The pictures you were posting this whole time, I've been following you on Facebook, and it's just mind-blowing. Like, every picture you posted, I was like, damn, dude, this is so awesome. So what was it like? I guess let's start with, how was it with the whole COVID experience? Was it kind of freaky? Was it kind of like nerve-wracking?
At the start it was. I was originally supposed to start in April, but that just kept getting pushed back and eventually just turned into a May start. I didn't even know if I was going to start this year. But finally I just was like, I'm either going to do it this year or I'm going to do it next year. So I might as well just do it this year. But getting down the CDTC actually shut down the shuttles down to the border. So there was a lot of people who just, if they wanted to do it, they just couldn't because they didn't have the shuttles anymore. I was initially going to drive myself down there. I just kind of had this vehicle. I was just going to ditch at the border as kind of a beater. But my parents actually offered to drive me all the way from Ohio. So that's what ended up happening. And it was really weird at the start. I ran into like maybe 6 other hikers for the whole trail. 2 of them my first day, which was kind of nice. But I kept running into people where they were like, yeah, you're like the first hiker I've seen.
Wow.
So it was really weird. The towns, like most of the towns, a lot of the stuff was just starting to open back up. We still had to wear a mask and use hand sanitizer before we went shopping and stuff. But the hotels had just kind of started opening up, but I ended up staying in a lot of RV parks, just kind of camping out. All the restaurants were takeout, stuff like that. But I really didn't feel like they didn't want us there. It's just kind of like, it was just, they were in the process of reopening. We were just kind of there.
Did you think it made it more difficult? I mean, this is your 3rd long distance trail. Did you think it made it more difficult to complete, or did it just kind of?
Not really. Like most of what you need as a hiker was there. Like the hotels were open, the restaurants were open. You just had to follow the guidelines. You couldn't eat in the restaurants. You just get takeout, stuff like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because like what you're doing and when you're backpacking and through hiking something is like, you don't really need that much. You just
you're out in the woods for like pretty much 5 days out of the week, and then like the one day you're in town, all you really need is food.
All right.
But yeah, most of the services were available, and it wasn't like anything was closed down to the point where you get into a town you couldn't get anything.
So I'm going to ask. You already know the question I'm going to ask. Comparing the 3, which one's the roughest, man?
I'll say this one was the most beautiful. And it had points where it was super easy, and it had points where it was super hard. I'd probably say, like, terrain-wise, the Appalachian is probably still the hardest. But overall, like, being out there and, like, mental with the terrain, like, everything, like, combined, this one is probably the hardest. Just because you get stretches where you're, like, in the basin and you're just walking through absolutely nothing for, like, 5 days. And the water carries, they're not as bad as you might think. I think the biggest one I did was like 20 miles. But they're still a lot bigger than the Pacific Crest would be. But I also think that's very year dependent, How
how's your body holding up? You're still relatively young, so
I
compared to
did a
someone like
lot
me.
better than I did on the Pacific Crest for sure. I don't remember if I told you this, but on the Pacific Crest, there was a point I went down like 110 pounds or something silly like that, just because I wasn't eating enough. With this trail, I only lost like maybe 10 pounds or so. So I stayed in pretty good shape. I didn't have any major injuries. I did have my sandals fall off once, but that's pretty much par for the course for these trails at this point.
That was my next question. Do you still rock the sandals the whole trail?
Yep, only went through 3 pairs.
Wow, dude, you're crazy, man. That's so impressive because, I mean, I wear sandals all the time. I pretty much only wear sandals when it's starting to get chilly out. But I mean,
Yeah,
even
I'm still wearing them right now.
yeah, even in the mid to late fall, I'm still rocking sandals. I just hate wearing shoes. It's like the
Yeah.
best footwear ever.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's really cheap too.
Yeah, super cheap. So, did you have to make any like significant gear changes on the CDT, or is it pretty much just the same?
It's about the same what you'd expect. I thought about getting like lighter gear and investing in like getting some Dyneema stuff that's a little bit lighter. But it delaminates and it's just so expensive that there's no point. At least for me.
I personally, I don't know a ton about the CDT. Like everybody talks AT, PCT, but the CDT is kind of its own it's the beast, I guess, kind of in the world
Yeah,
of through hiking.
It's the one everybody tells you is going to be so isolated and there's going to be no one out there. This year was kind of like that with the whole COVID thing. But everybody I talked to, like all the locals who kind of interact with the hikers on regular, they're like, this trail is pretty popular. I stopped at one place along the way called Doc Campbell's, and I was talking to the guy, a really nice guy. He's like, yeah, you're hiker number 27 for the year. Usually we see that in a day. So it's definitely not as popular as the other two, but like in the last couple of years, the popularity has just skyrocketed, and there's going to be so many more people out there.
So you're literally like a few weeks off the trail right now, maybe 1 or 2. I don't know. I kind of lost track.
I finished on the 3rd. So what is today? The 28th, 29th?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so a little less than a month.
So where are you at right now?
I'm in Missoula, Montana. It's kind of where I just kind of ended up here. When I finished it on a dirt road by the border. It's literally a little Canadian, Canada sign. Stuck my thumb out. My original goal was to get to, I think it was either Bozeman or Helena. But Missoula works too because I want to learn how to ski this winter, and so I figure working at a ski resort will be my best bet for that. This place just kind of worked out really well. It's just where my hitch ended up. They have a really nice hostel here. It's where I am now. And they said they'd have me till March, so it works out really well.
Are you working there, or are you just kind of hanging out? And
yeah, so right now I have a job at a hotel, just like housekeeping stuff, really simple thing. Hopefully when the ski resort opens up, I'll be able to get a job there. I've already sent in an application. They've gotten back to me. They don't really start their interviewing process till like the end of October though. So.
A man of continual adventure. You're not going to try and ride your bike home this time, are you?
Probably not. Weird might strike me, but we'll see.
So let's dig into it a little bit. What was it like to start out on this third trail? Were you really not that nervous this time around because it's like old hat at this point, or?
Yeah, from the sense of like actually hiking, and I'm like, oh, I've got this. But then with the whole pandemic, it's like, maybe things are going to shut down and I will have to just throw in the towel and do it next year. But other than that, it was just kind of, you hit the border, you take a picture and you get walking.
How many miles a day you average on this one?
This one was actually pretty high compared to the other two. It was like about 17, overall for the whole trail. But like at my first day it was like 17 something. Like my second day was 16. New Mexico is just like the first section of the trail is just super flat. It's all dirt roads. It's really well graded. Colorado gets a little bit rougher, but then you get down in the basin and you kind of go from like really, really steep terrain to really flat terrain. There's like no in between. So it was like overall, it was probably about the same average that I had on the Appalachian.
Nice. What's it like going through Colorado? I mean, were you hitting some really high elevation through there? And
yeah, so our first like big welcome to Colorado was the San Juans. And we went from our average elevation at that point had been about 8,000 feet, which it sounds like a lot, but you're just kind of like up on a plateau and it's just not, you don't feel like you're really up there. Then you get into Colorado and you're at like 12.5 for pretty much the whole state. You do dip down a little bit here and there, but that's like the average. Yeah, it was crazy. It was super beautiful though.
I know, dude, every time you posted some pictures, I was like, dear Lord, this is amazing. Would you say it had the best views of all the trails or?
Oh, it really, I mean, the Pacific Crest comes close in some spots, but like it just like alone just kind of blew it away. And then the Wind Rivers in Wyoming were even more spectacular.
Did you enjoy the isolation of this one a little more? Because I know the other two are like super popular. They're like at this point in the game.
It was different. I definitely would have liked there to be more people. I did actually hike with somebody through pretty much all of Colorado and Wyoming. We kind of flip flopped with each other through New Mexico, and we thought, you get into Colorado, it's going to be snow for like a month, because that was my experience in the Pacific Crest, and I thought that's what was going to happen. So like, all right, we'll hike together for like this first little section. It's supposed to be really bad with snow, and we get up there and there's no snow. So we just kept hiking together, and we pretty much went all the way through. We ended up splitting off at Yellowstone because he started hitchhiking, and I was like, I gotta walk the whole way.
Yeah, man. Do you feel super accomplished that you've hit that Triple Crown, or is it kind of just like on to the next?
Yeah, I mean, I thought I was gonna feel like, I never really get emotional at the end of the trail, so I'm just kind of like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah.
And that's how this one was too. But I think I'll definitely take a break from the hiking for a bit. But I never know. Maybe next year I will be back out there. But yeah, there's nothing too special about when I finish.
I just interviewed pretty recently a guy named Eric Schlimmer, and he said he's the guy I asked you if I could give him your phone number, because he has a trail out in the Adirondacks he wants you to hike. It's like not long at all, but it's like he calls it like the Thru-Hiker or the Triple Crown Killer or something, because like nobody's completed it because it's just rough. So it sounds like it might be something up your alley. It's a Trans Adirondack route.
Okay.
Did you have to do all I've heard, and this is like 5-6 years ago when I thru-hiked or whatever, and was there a lot of land nav stuff on the CDT, or is it all pretty much just like the AT or the PCT where you just kind of follow the trail?
Oh, so it's probably, I'd say the trail's like roughly 85% complete. And a lot of it's just dirt roads. When you're not on a trail, you're on a dirt road, which seems fine until you realize there's a lot of dirt roads and it's not really well marked. And you'll be just kind of in that mode where, you're just kind of cruising with your trekking poles, and you look at your GPS and you're like, oh, I'm like, my little red lines here, and then your dots like, So it's a lot of that. But then that was really mostly New Mexico. Once we got into Colorado, it got a little bit better marked, especially once we got on the Colorado Trail. There was a little bit of sections in New Mexico where there was like, oh, I just walk into this wall of brush for about a mile. But there was only like 1 or 2 sections like that, and they weren't that long.
So
for the most part, the trail's pretty well maintained.
So it's not as drastic as people make it sound, just like every other trail on Earth.
Yeah, no. There's a lot of blowdowns, which is really irritating. Probably the most I've ever seen. Like on the PCT, there are a few, but like this one, you just be waiting for them for miles. That could get really frustrating. But other than that, yeah, there's a trail like 90% of the time.
So what was some of the favorite stuff that happened? Because every trip has these like amazing things that happen to you, these amazing stories, whether it's like an accomplishment or just like some crazy whack shit that happened. There's got to be something.
So the funniest thing I can think of right off the bat was in New Mexico. It was right before I hit the Colorado border. I was just up on this really big, pretty plateau, super pretty. I think it was at like 10,000 feet. And I was just cruising along. And then I see these 2 guys off in the distance. I hear them yelling. So I stop. I'm like, oh, maybe they're thru-hikers. Maybe they're looking for the trail. And they get a little closer. I'm like, oh, they don't have backpacks on. Get a little closer. And they're just wearing like jeans and a baseball cap and a t-shirt. I'm talking to them. They're like, yeah, so we were up here laying fence, and our buddy at the truck just kind of left. We're stuck up here. And their phones had died, so they couldn't call him. So I gave them my battery pack so they could charge their phone. But it was just super funny because we were just in the middle of nowhere. Like there's nothing else out there.
Wow.
But yeah, they ran down. They're like, "Hey man, do you have like any way, can we use your phone?" It's like, "Hey, you can just have my battery pack and a cord and charge your phone."
Wow. That guy sounds like an asshole if you left him there like that.
I don't really remember how that went down. I just kind of gave him my battery pack and left. I'm like, "Oh, I hope they got a hold of him." And then when I was in, what was it, Doc Campbell's, so there's kind of like this alternate called the Gila River alternate. You can take. It's super pretty. Anyways, so I lost my reading glasses and I needed them to like be able to read the stuff on my GPS.
Yeah.
I could still kind of see it, but not super well. So I got to Don Campbell's and I was talking to the store owner there. And he's like, we used to carry reading glasses, like a year ago. And I'm like, oh, it sucks. And he's like, wait a second. He called up his wife who just happened to be in like a town or something. He's like, oh yeah, she can pick up a pair of reading glasses for you. She's on her way here anyways. So they bought me a pair of reading glasses and it was really nice.
That's kind of important, man. You can't really get too far. That's something you don't want to lose. How the hell did you lose your the most important thing you need?
I have pockets on my cargo shorts and they get holes in them and I'll just put them in the pocket and they'll just fall out and I won't notice.
That's so great. You lost your the most important thing. That's messed up. So you're planning on working there through the winter. You're going to become a ski master.
Hopefully, that's the goal.
Do you have any plans to come back to Ohio ever, or are you out of here?
I'll probably come back and visit over the holidays. For the summer season, actually, the reason I was saying I don't have any through hikes planned next summer, there's this guiding company called St. Elijah's Guides. They do a lot of really cool stuff up in Alaska. Their entry-level position is just like a glacier guide. But it's really neat because they'll fly you out there, they'll pay for your lodging, and you're just kind of like out there in Alaska working this guiding job. That's what I'm hoping to do over this summer.
Oh man, that's gonna be that's one place that I want to visit badly, and believe it or not, every person I talk to on the podcast like, I need to get to Alaska. So you're just crazy enough to do it. I think. When's the book deal coming? Come on, you're a Triple Crowner now. Isn't that what you guys do when you're done?
Well, if I do write a book, I don't know how successful it'll be because I finished all 3 trails, and every book you read that just like Bill Bryson's A Walk in the Woods or like Into the Wild, they're great books, but they never complete the whole trail. Yeah. So it's like I completed all 3 trails, so my book's never going to be successful at this point.
There's no failure involved to make it interesting. It's just all success. You just call it all success all the time.
Something like that.
So, what was your favorite state out there on the CDT?
Oh, it's between Wyoming and Colorado. Colorado is more consistent. You get into Colorado and you're just in awesome mountains for the whole state. And it's absolutely beautiful. Mm-hmm. But there's this one little section in Wyoming called the Wind River Range. And it's the gnarliest mountains I've ever seen. And the Sierra and the Pacific Crest doesn't even hold a candle to it. It's insane. Wow. They're just you've seen the pictures I posted. It's crazy. It's just 2,000 feet of granite just coming, straight out of the ground. But it's between that little section of maybe 150, 200 miles in Wyoming and the entire state of Colorado.
Wow. I believe when I was in a band driving around the U.S., we drove through Wyoming briefly, but it's not something we drove through the flat, boring part where there was just fences and hay. Yeah, I would love to get back out there and check it out.
It'll blow your mind.
Yeah, and a lot of people I don't think from where we're from think of Wyoming as they're think about cowboys and
Yellowstone, stuff like that.
Yeah, they don't think of beautiful, crazy mountain ranges and all that stuff. So what's it like being just like me, an Ohio dude that just kind of went out and saw this stuff? What advice do you have from people around here, the people we know and grew up around who probably have no desire to leave Ohio? What advice do you have for those people? Because once you see the world, you feel different.
Yeah, it's very hard to go back. So if you're just going to be let's say you have a week and you have a van, you're just going to go out there and road trip it. I'd recommend looking into pack mule, guided trips in the Wind Rivers, stuff like that. There's just so much of that out there. where you can pay a guide and they'll like pretty much hold your hand. They'll just lead you along on a horse. You got all your supplies there, and you'll get to see all the really cool stuff, but not have to worry about like any of the heartache of getting hurt or the fatigue. That's one thing I'd recommend. And then going to Colorado, like anywhere you go in Colorado is going to be amazing. I'm pretty sure just about everyone knows that. And then New Mexico, there's a lot of really cool stuff there that you wouldn't think. When I thought of New Mexico, I just thought it was just going to be flat desert, nothing. But northern New Mexico, like Mount Taylor and stuff, there's some really neat like eroded mesas. And it's not like how Utah is. I've never been there, but I've heard all the parks there are pretty well crowded. New Mexico, you could just get on a dirt road and drive for a bit and find this amazing looking view, and there's no one there. It's really pretty.
Yeah, I had an experience like that recently. We went to Upper Peninsula, the northern tip of the Upper Peninsula with the pictured rocks and stuff, and it was so crowded, and it was like we had to wear masks to hike the trails. And I've been to New Mexico, and I can 100% agree with you, man. It's like it looks like this alien landscape. It looks like this crazy like foreign world, and there's just, like you said, mesas, and there's this beautiful. I don't think a lot of people describe the desert as beautiful, but it is. Like, it's super cool looking. Like, people that are from there are probably like, you're insane. But, like, when you come from Ohio and all we have is, like, we have a lot of rivers, we have a lot of forests, but, like, you go and corn and all that fun, typical shit. You go out and see something like that, and it's like, when I first saw New Mexico, my mind was blown, dude.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Like, but yeah, just, like, get out there, whatever you can see, go see it. I mean, there's plenty of just amazing places I could go on and on about.
Yeah, so you've put in the time, you've put in the miles. A lot of people are starting to get into backpacking. So what, like, I don't know if you would consider yourself an expert, but by proxy you are, because you've put in more miles than anybody I've ever met, probably at this point in my life. So what's some like practical tips for backpacking, even for somebody who's been started, for somebody who's, been backpacking for 10 years, what's like the most logical shit you've learned to do?
Well, for one, like you don't need half of the shit you're carrying. The trick to getting a lighter backpack is not by spending a bunch of money on all this fancy gear. It's just by not carrying stuff.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest one. And then, like, if you look at stuff like 100 miles or something like that seems really intimidating at first, but once you get out there and start moving, it's not. It's just like, you do 10 miles a day. Oh, there's 10 days. But odds are you'll probably do it in a lot less.
Yeah. The big miles scare people for sure. I mean, I just went backpacking last weekend, or no, 2 weekends ago. And it was like, I took my friends out for their first time, and we were like, yeah, we're going to do 10, 11 miles tomorrow. And they're like, and I was like, that's tough-ish, but not like, I mean, you have all day to do it. It's not like there's anything else going on. You wake up and you hike until 7:00 at night. So it is intimidating for a lot of people to do that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's not that bad. Don't carry a bunch of stuff you don't need. Those are probably the biggest things I can say. I mean, the best way to learn is just to get out there and do it.
What's your most favorite piece of gear that you carried with you, whether it be clothes, backpack, anything?
It's probably what's left of my t-shirt, because I wore it for all 3 trails.
Holy shit. It's
just like the back of it's just absolutely destroyed. My mom wants me to mail it home so she can frame it, but I've just been super lazy and haven't done it yet. But yeah, it's just like a wrecked Captain America t-shirt. You've seen it in pretty much all my pictures.
Yep. So what's next on the agenda, man? You got any big plans in the future? Or are you hanging the hat up?
I'm definitely gonna keep hiking. I need a break for sure. That'll probably be over this summer, maybe next summer. But there's a lot of trails I have really like a lot of interest in. There's the Pacific Northwest, which it's kind of like the CDT of the CDT, where it's like the next big, you've never heard anything about it. Oh, it sounds so brutal kind of trail. And I'd want to do that. It's like 1,200 miles it's pretty much starts where the CDT finishes and goes west all the way to the ocean.
Wow.
It's really cool. It's a lot more bushwhacking, stuff like that. But what I'm really excited to do, so, there's the Arizona Trail, and there's something called the Hayduke Trail, and there's the Idaho Centennial. And if you look at them, so the Arizona Trail is obviously in Arizona. The Hayduke is in Utah, and it goes through like arches and all this really cool kind of canyon land stuff. And the Idaho Centennial is just above it, and it just pretty much starts at the border of Idaho and goes north all the way to Canada. So if I could, like the Arizona and the Hayduke are already connected. So if I could do both of those and then kind of like bushwhack / road walk my way up to the Idaho Centennial, I could do the whole basin. And I don't think anybody's done that before. It's a lot of really high arid desert, so water would be a big issue. But I could cache it or figure something out. But that's probably, if I do like another hike over 2,000 miles, that would be what I'd be thinking about.
So what mileage are you at right now?
It's hard to say because the Continental had a lot of like alternates and shortcuts and stuff. A lot of people say when they finish their triple, they're at 8,000. But I'm probably going to be more at like 7,500 is what I would say, just to be safe. But it might be more than 79. I don't really know for sure.
It's if you were a car, you'd need some new tires.
Oh yeah.
Maybe an oil change, a tune up.
Yeah.
Suspension redo. That's a lot. That's a lot, man. Like that is a lot of hiking. And how old are you now? What, 20?
Yep, 20. I'll be 21 in March.
You're not even old enough to drink, and you've hiked over 7,000 miles, man. That still blows my mind. Like it's pure insanity. And I'm actually like super stoked for you, dude, because like you're from where I'm from. You've done these huge accomplishments, and I think that's just super badass. I think you should come back. I think you should do one of these days. You should do the Buckeye Trail. You probably get it done like a week.
There's so the North Country Trail, right? It starts I think it starts in southern North Dakota and goes all the way north to New York. Mm-hmm. That's something I'd be interested in. It's like 4,600 miles, but it does pretty much a good section of the Buckeye Trail. And it literally goes right through our backyard, pretty much too. It goes right down through White House.
Right, it literally goes along the river right there at Farnsworth. What is the other one? Yeah. Where the canal is, it goes through a ton of the park.
Grand Rapids?
Yeah, out there in Grand Rapids. It's pretty insane. That trail actually runs within a few hundred yards of my grandma's place up in Michigan too. It's pretty crazy. Like it runs by my house and then it runs by a place that's like hours away from where I live, and it's pretty awesome. And we just did part of it up there in Michigan at Pictured Rocks. So I've been on parts of that trail, but that one sounds intimidating. I don't think that one's finished either yet.
No, it's a lot of road walking. The big deal with that one would be the weather window. The train itself, I don't think would be that bad, just because I think North Dakota is like their highest point's like 7,000 feet, which is still pretty decent. But most of the trail is like it's in the North Country. It's relatively low elevation. But the thing is, you start in like North Dakota in March, and it's still going to be absolutely freezing there. And if you're lucky, you can get to New York by, let's say October, late October, early November. It's going to be pretty freezing there too.
So what was the weather like for the trail generally?
Oh, it was pretty good. Compared to the Pacific Crest, it was amazing. I think I got rained on maybe a dozen times. I did get snowed on a little bit, like my third day in the San Juans. It was just like a dusting and it melted off by the end of the day. But other than that, it was just like sunshine and pretty clear skies for the whole time. You
didn't have to really get too concerned with like cold weather gear or anything?
In New Mexico, it did get down. I think it got down to like the 20s one night. And I have a 30-degree bag, so it got a little chilly, but this year is pretty mild. And then our last day in the Bob Marshall in Montana, it got a little cold too.
What was I know at the end I was following along there trying to keep up with you, and there was a section you had to kind of skirt for some reason. What was that all about?
Oh yeah, so I took an official I took something called the Big Sky Cutoff to begin with, which that was pretty much coming out of Yellowstone. I just essentially, the trail cuts west out of Yellowstone and then does like this big loop and then reconnects up at what's that town called? Butte. So what I did is I just kind of went straight out of Yellowstone, and it cut off about 200 miles. But instead of going through like the Bitterroot Mountains and all that, I went through the Absarokas and the Spanish Peaks. But there's that. And then at the very end, East Glacier was closed due to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So I pretty much had to road walk. I just took a left onto the road. I think it was, I don't remember the name of that pass. But I walked down the road to West Glacier, and I just kept walking the road up to Canada.
So you said you kind of ate a little more on this trip. What did that entail? You just bought more food, and did you have more of like a dialed-in diet?
Well, I learned from the Pacific Crest that I needed to eat more, and like, you know, even if I don't want to eat, I shouldn't eat. And a lot of the food I think on the Pacific Crest, I had like a 12-liter food bag. On this trip, I had like a 20-liter food bag. Mm-hmm. So part of the motivation to eat more was just to make my pack lighter. But yeah, I just pretty much same what I ate on the Pacific Crest. A lot of ramen, a lot of granola bars.
That catches up with you once you stop hiking. If you can't notice with me, can't eat that shit anymore. You gotta keep moving. So yeah, man, like, was there any like crazy new animals that you got to encounter out there? Or was it pretty much?
So I got to see a lot of elk in Colorado, which was great. Got to see a lot of moose. Got to see my first moose in Colorado, which is really awesome.
That was your first moose?
Yep, I didn't see any on the Appalachian or the Pacific Crest.
Bro, come on. Nobody ever sees moose on the AT. I saw so many. I don't know what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I saw so many in Colorado, and I saw even more in Wyoming. But
were they close?
When I got into Yellowstone, I actually got bluff charged by a grizzly bear. It was really scary, especially considering I didn't have my bear spray.
Dude.
But it stopped within about 10 feet of me, and we just kind of looked at each other for a minute, and I backed up, and I got about 70 feet away, and I took a picture, and I was like, okay, I lived.
You legit got bluff charged by did you know if it was a male or a female, or you just were trying not to shit your pants?
So I was hiking along, and I literally just come into Yellowstone. I took a picture at the sign. I was like a mile into the park, and then I stopped, get some water, start moving again, and I hear this thing crashing down through the brush. I look up, I'm like, oh shit, that's a bear. You know, maybe he doesn't see me, so I'm doing what you're supposed to do. I'm yelling, I'm clacking my trekking poles together, all that stuff. I'm like, no, it definitely sees me. It just doesn't care. So I was just like, I was just sitting there yelling. I'm like, this thing doesn't turn around. I'm just screwed. So fortunately it stopped, and I was very, very like, it was terrifying.
What, I mean, like, what is your reaction to that? Cause I know mine would be probably freeze and try not to cry maybe.
It kind of like sank. Like at first I'm like, oh, it's a bear. I'm going to yell at it. It's going to, turn. It's going to see me and run away. That was like my first reaction. And that kind of like faded. It's like, no, it's not going to do that. And that's just like kind of racking my brain. Like, what am I going to do now? It's obviously not stopping. I literally lost my bear spray like 2 days before this. Like,
you got to stop losing stuff.
So I just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I just kept yelling at it, and I was so lucky that it stopped. I don't really know like what would have happened. Obviously I would have gotten mauled if it hadn't, but yeah, it was terrifying.
That's like everyone's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
on through hiking. And that is like, I mean, I kind of hoped you had a cool story like that. I'm not going to lie. And you did. So that's sick.
It's cool looking back on it. But in that very moment, it was absolutely horrifying.
Yeah. I woke up the other night when we were backpacking to like a noise I had never heard before. And by the time this episode's out, I'll have released a couple of Bigfoot Halloween special episodes that I've talked to you. And so like I've been telling people this all week. I researched Bigfoot stuff online for like weeks going into these interviews because I had no idea what I'm talking about. So I wanted to like be informed. And then I immediately go into the backcountry and hear these like insane noises in the middle of the night. I'm like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. This isn't real. Like, this isn't happening. No. And then I come to find out it was like this deer noise I'd never heard before.
Dude, deer make some freaky noises.
Freaky. It was like, the only way I could describe it is like a dog barking if it had a sore throat. It was like a raspy barking noise.
The elk, when I was in Washington on the Pacific Crest and pretty much most of Colorado out here, the elk would make that noise, and you'd be up on a ridge, and then you just hear, it sounds like a scream, and it's like,
Yeah.
what's that?
We don't have that in Ohio, man. We don't have bugling elk, and it sounded like a demon in the middle of the night. I'm just like, what? It's like, I woke up to the crashing noise, like the crashing through the brush, and then it was this like barking, raspy squeal, and I was like, what is happening right now? You have any of those experiences, like you know what I'm talking about, where you wake up in the middle of the night and you're by yourself and there's just a noise and you're like, what the shit?
Yeah, I had that a lot with the elk, or one night in particular, actually. It was like right before Yellowstone when I was still hiking with my friend. We camped out on this dirt road, and we were in our tents. We just hung our food bags because, grizzlies. Mm-hmm. And we're sleeping there, and there's a lot of cows, like all over this trail, like from New Mexico to Colorado to Montana. You'll see them everywhere. But anyways, so we're sleeping, and like I kind of remember like waking up, I'm kind of groggy, and I hear something like sniffing outside our tent, and it's really loud. It's like right by our tent, and I'm like, my first instinct, that's a bear. Yeah. So I turn over to my friend. I'm like, I don't even know how I do this. I'm like really chill. I'm like, hey, dude, I think there's a bear outside our tent. He's like, what? And he just starts yelling and screaming, and it just takes off down the road, and it's like clomping of hooves, and we're like, oh, it's just a cow. But it was really, he just like absolutely lost it, and I have no idea how. I was like, I guess I was just so tired, I just didn't care. I'm like, oh, there's a bear, dude, scare it off.
What was how'd you feel about the moose, man?
They didn't really scare me too much. They were just kind of like, for a lot of people, they say, oh, a moose will mess you up if you get mad at you. But most of the time when I'd see them, it was like, we were both like really surprised. Most of the time, like they would look at me, I'd look at it and it'd take off. I'd be walking and I'd just like look over, and like there's one in a field like 100 feet away from me, and I yell at it. It looks at me and it just goes back to doing whatever it's doing.
I was just blown away by how big they are.
Yeah, they're huge.
It's like half the size of an elephant. It feels like they're just freaking massive.
Yeah, I saw a really big bull moose coming out of. It was like what was that? It was in Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. There's like a cutoff you can do that's like straight, and the official route goes in like this little U curve. Mm-hmm. We had the bright idea of doing the U curve and then coming back down the cutoff to get into town again, like for a second time. And so I was on that little cutoff coming south, and there's this really big meadow, and I look over and there's a moose, and he's got huge antlers. And I yell at it, and kind of looks at me, and just goes back down to grazing. It was crazy, but it was huge.
So you, what kind of tent were you using for this hike?
I was just using a single person Nemo. It's the Hornet, one person. I'm actually really surprised I didn't break it, because I kind of have a track record of just like wrecking my gear. But it made it through the whole hike. I think it weighs like maybe 2.5 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, our last episode, we both were kind of like, I don't give a shit about gear, but at a certain point, you have to choose something that is gonna work too. You can't just go to Walmart and buy like a $20 tent and hike 5,000 miles, because it will break eventually. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So it's not like, I think I paid like $300 for it. It's like on the end of the spectrum where it's lightweight, but it's not Dyneema, so it's still relatively durable. But
yeah, so I know when I finished the AT and kind of wrapped up, kind of was like, felt like shit for a while. Was kind of got into like a bummed out. This is your third trail. You're kind of like running at full speed all the time. Do you kind of get that when you finish a trail? You just kind of feel like, God, now what?
With the two before this, not really. With this one, a little bit towards like when I was on the trail towards the end, I'm like, oh, what am I gonna do? Then I found out about the guiding company over the summer, and I'm just like, I'll just winter in Missoula, and I'll go do that over the summer. But I don't really get like, I guess people call it like post-trail depression or something like that. I just don't really get that.
Well, that's because you never stopped hiking.
Yeah. So maybe in like a month or so I will, but right now I'm feeling pretty good.
So are you fairly convinced that you're going to dedicate the rest of your life to the outdoors?
Oh yeah, for sure.
What are you thinking? What are you thinking you're gonna end up? Like if ideally, where are you gonna be?
Honestly, I would really want to become like a mountaineer. It just seems like, because every time I saw a mountain out there, it's just like, I want to climb that.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, I couldn't, because I'm like, that's the one thing I don't like about through hiking is you don't get enough time to spend in these really cool places. Like,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, it's awesome. You get to see all this really cool stuff. But at the same time, you're like, oh, it'd be so neat if I could just like set up a base camp and go climb like those 3 mountains over there or something like that. Especially in the Wind Rivers. It's just like there's so much cool stuff there that I just want to like sit down and just explore the whole place.
You think you're gonna do the guiding stuff for a while and see where that takes you, and do some more traveling? Are you gonna aim for around the world, or are you just kind of happy with the U.S.?
Right now, I think North America seems pretty good. I'll go up to Alaska, like I said, and start working for that guiding company. What's cool about them is like I said, they're like base level stuff is they're kind of like glacier guides and stuff. But that's like the entry position, right? And then they're more experienced guides who are doing unascended peaks and stuff like that.
Mm.
So that's really cool. And I think it'd be really neat if I could kind of get my foot in the door with them and see where it takes me.
Man, I'm just like vicariously going to be living through you for the next couple of years, I think, because I mean, the stuff you're doing, I honestly, and this is selfish of me, I wish you would post on Facebook and stuff more so I can just be like, man, Kyle's doing such awesome shit all the time. It's going to be interesting when you're up there in Alaska, because I had a buddy, Kyle, who's been on the podcast too. He worked up there for a while, and this was probably like 15 years ago, and he still talks about it. He's like, dude, that was the best experience of my life.
Yeah, I have a friend who lives up there, and they're like, you come up here, you're just never going to leave.
Well, you've got the grizzly bear experience, you've got the elk, you got the experience with moose. I mean, what more do you need? You know how to hike. All you need to do is learn how to climb a few mountains, and you're good to go, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So, man, I'm super stoked for you. Like, I'm actually kind of blown away, because before you said you came to my presentation, you're like, I want to try that. And like, just to watch you just succeed is so badass. So I really hope that you do come back to Ohio. We can hang out again, and maybe, I think if you, something like through paddling the Maumee River or something, you'd be like a snap. Like, you'd probably do it and be like, that was easy. But I think it'd be a fun decompression thing for you when you come back to Ohio for a little while. Cause
that'd be neat.
Yeah, dude. So do you have any final words of wisdom you want to give out to the people of the world as a very accomplished 20-year-old? Because when I was 20, I was still like just partying and being an asshole.
Just like, you have an idea of what you want to do, just go out and do it, I guess. It's super cliche, but it's like the best thing I can say.
Well, that's always my advice to people, man. Like, there's a lot of people I know that talk about stuff. Like, they talk about through hiking. They talk about going on their first backpacking trip. They talk about wanting to start a podcast. And I'm like, well, the only thing separating you from doing it and not doing it is just taking the step out the door. Like, go. Yeah. Go. Don't talk about podcasts. Don't worry about the gear. Don't talk about backpacks. Go to REI, buy a backpack, and go. Don't think about it. Just go. So, thanks again for coming on, man. Like I said, I'm super proud of you. I'm super stoked to see what you're going to be doing in the future, and I hope we stay in touch through the years. And I want to hear about all your more badass adventures.
Yeah, if I do come to Ohio, probably over the holidays, I'll hit you up.
All right, man. Have a good one. I hope you have a fun rest of the day. It looks like you're just kind of chilling in a hostel. So
yeah.
All right, dude. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching this episode of the Aptitude Outdoors Podcast here on YouTube. If you can, give me a hand. Go down below. Hit that subscribe button. Ring that notification bell so you know when every single episode of the Aptitude Outdoors Podcast is coming up for your viewing pleasure. I want to thank Kyle for coming on tonight again. Just an amazing dude, amazingly accomplished outdoorsman at only 20 years of age. I'm very excited to see what Kyle's future holds for him. I can't even imagine what he's got in store next. So thanks for watching. See you next time.